Welcome back to the 9th episode of The Relay. Yeah, it's been a minute since we've been on YouTube, but we're back and hopefully back on a regularly scheduled programming. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the hosts and their World Cups as they came to an end last week. And so we're going to discuss Canada, Mexico, and the USA and how they performed at this World Cup. Then we're going to finally do our wide receiver superlatives of the NFL season as it is fast approaching. 9 weeks to go. I know it seems like an eternity, but I feel like the World Cup has kind of sped up that process of trying to get to the start of the NFL season. We're also going to talk about a draft that we're going to do where we're going to draft seasons / playoffs / tournaments to see who can come up with the best sports calendar overall. And then we're going to preview today's semifinal and tomorrow's semifinal between Spain and France and England and Argentina. And we'll cap it off with our MLB All-Star Game predictions. All here today on the Relay. If you could please subscribe to our YouTube, please give us a like, and please follow us on Instagram, X, Threads, and TikTok at The Relay Media. Other than that, sit back, relax, grab a snack, and let's run the relay. Now that the United States, Mexico, and Canada have all been eliminated, we are going to talk about which host nation should feel best about its World Cup and which should feel like it was a wasted opportunity. All three host nations reached the knockout stage, but none advanced beyond the round of 16. Canada lost 3-0 to Morocco. Mexico fell 3-2 to England in the Azteca, and the United States was beaten thoroughly 4-1 by Belgium. Let's do a country-by-country evaluation, but before we start that, I want to ask you, Daniel, what did you think about the performance of the hosts in general at this World Cup? I think we had a combined, 7 or 8 wins from all teams. I know Mexico would have had 4, the USA had 3, and I believe Canada had 2, right? Because they beat South Africa and they beat, so 9 combined wins from all host nations. Overall, how would you assess how the host nations did at this World Cup?
Overall, I think we all did good. I think in our own collective ways, we all achieved what we wanted. I think the goals were to obviously get out the groups, which all these teams did. Canada not winning their group was a bit, I guess, diminished. They should have won their group. I think considering you had the pressure of the other two host nations winning their group, I think it would have been nice had they also done that. But overall, I think all of us getting to at least the round of 16 was pretty good. Granted, none of us won to go further. I think I give it about just maybe a B- grade overall.
Yeah, we'll go over grades for each individual team going, as we talk about each individual team. But my personal thought process on how the hosts did, I think the hosts all met minimum expectations, which I think is a positive. There's a lot of World Cups, especially recently, where you've had some hosts that aren't necessarily, the biggest footballing nations, whether that be a Qatar or a South Africa, wasn't able to get out of the group and didn't really meet the expectations that were put up on them. Even though South Africa, I feel like, did have a pretty good World Cup in 2010. Brazil obviously got destroyed 7-1 in the semifinal, and I think for all the goodwill that they had before that tournament started, I would think that Brazilians would also say that was probably below expectations for them. I think expectations were to win that World Cup. And then Russia, I think, was the one country where I think they exceeded expectations with the 2018 quarterfinals run, and they could have beat Croatia because they went to pens. And so I think Russia is probably the most recent story of a host nation actually performing above. All three of these teams got to the round of 16, and some people may see that as a ceiling for all three of these teams. But what I will say is, in meeting expectations, they were, I would say, 2 of the teams, but even Canada I thought looked good. All teams were dominant, in their run to that ceiling, and so I think reaching your ceiling is one thing. seeing how you perform is another thing, and I think the performances were good from all three teams. Let's talk about the team that neither of us rep, which is Canada. But I think it has to be said that I think Canada did pretty well for themselves at this World Cup. Let's start off by this question: do you think reaching the round of 16 was enough to call Canada's tournament a success?
I'm a little in the middle of it, but I think
Okay.
so. I think it is a success overall that they made the round of 16. 'Cause I think while the quality is there for this team, I do think that it was kind of like not wasted, but more or less it's like I don't think this team flows well. Like these players flow well together on a national team, and then just everything going into it, injuries, everything like that. How they managed this World Cup, I think reaching the round of 16 was good for what they had to go through so far, or what they did go through.
Yeah, I think round of 16 was kind of where I had their ceiling as well, and they met that. And so I wouldn't necessarily say they surpassed expectations, because when you look at the round of 32 opponent in South Africa, I think they're okay, but I don't think it's a world beater per se. I think both the USA and Mexico played much tougher opponents in the round of 16 in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Ecuador. And so, I do agree that when we talk about injuries, I think that's going to be the biggest thing that people talk about coming out of this World Cup for Canada. You had Moise Bombito in there, but he wasn't himself, especially in that Morocco game. Like, I thought he was all right, but the passing just wasn't there like we've seen out of Moise Bombito. And then, losing, Ismail Kone to that horrific leg injury against Qatar was tough. You lost a couple of other attackers in that phase, and so it's a tough ask sometimes when you have all that pressure and then you have the injuries on top of that. But I think Canada, for what it's worth, I think they did all right. I mean, talking about what they did, right? They earned their first World Cup victory. For the first time in their World Cup history, they advanced out of the group. And I thought they showed legitimate attacking potential against some pretty good teams in this tournament. Morocco and Switzerland, both quarterfinalists, they played in this World Cup. And yes, they did lose to both of them, but I thought both of those games were very, very tough for the opposition. And I thought they were on the front foot for a large portion of whatever was going on in that game. I think the 3-0 loss to Morocco especially was kind of... I think the scoreline was a little flattering for Morocco in that aspect too. I think that Morocco could have been much better in that first half especially. Yes, Saibari got hurt, and you can say that they didn't take care of their chances or they didn't have any chances in that first half, but I thought that there wasn't as big of a gap between Morocco and Canada as the scoreline suggested. But, Canada get their first win, their first points, their first knockout victory, their first group stage advancement, and so for this team to have a lot of firsts happen in this World Cup, I think it's got to be considered a success at the end of the day. I want to ask you, who do you think within Canada enhanced their reputation the most? Was it a player? Was it Jesse Marsh? Was it the Federation?
I think it was Jesse Marsh. I think
Yeah.
the way his tactics went down and just the way he managed his team this World Cup was fantastic. I think, obviously he's the one facing the most adversity given, he's controlling the team, and the way he handled it and the way, they persevered through this tournament to even get to the round of 16, going through everything they went through, I think is a great success. And he is a lot to take credit for.
Yeah. I think Jesse Marsh is a very polarizing figure when it comes to the soccer landscape. In the footballing world, he is not necessarily the most liked man. I mean, this guy went to Leeds United and, he had a decent start to his tenure there, but then was pretty terrible in his second season, it was his second season, I believe it was. And RB Salzburg, I mean, I thought he did some good things there, but again, left that job. And so, obviously he's talked about his dislike, I guess you could say, of the United States Federation for their interview process for the 2026 cycle job. And I was with him at that time. When I saw what was happening in that time frame, it was one of the craziest times for U.S. soccer. And, I could go into a whole tangent about that specific day when Jesse Marsch was told that he wasn't going to be coach for the United States men's national team, and then he just goes on a tirade after the fact. But, I thought Jesse Marsch did really well in this World Cup. I thought tactically he set them up really well, and you can only do so much when you lose two of your top 5 players in Bombito, who was in and out of the lineup in this World Cup. I thought for some reason he was going to miss the entire World Cup after I saw a report, but he was there, on and off. And then Alphonso Davies. Alphonso Davies really only had a chance to play in one World Cup game against South Africa. I don't think we saw him in the Morocco game, but it's a tough ask in terms of the injury history of Alphonso Davies. But I think Canada, when you look at their reputation, I think Jesse Marsch for sure, I would say, had a stock up. I would also say that I'd give a stock up to Stefan Estacio. He had a lot of big moments. He had the game-winning goal against South Africa, but I thought he looked good in every game that they played. There wasn't a Stefan Estacio performance that I thought was bad by any means at this entire World Cup. I thought he looked good against Bosnia. I thought he looked good against Switzerland. I thought he looked good, really good against South Africa. Obviously got the game-winning goal there. And then in the Morocco game, I thought he was boss in the midfield. They were able to get the ball back so easily. And that's not just on Estacio, but Estacio was a big part of that. And so I'll give Stefan Estacio some credit there. All right, let's give a final grade for this World Cup for Canada before we move on to Mexico and the USA real quick. What's your final grade on how the Canadians performed? I'll go first. I'm going to give this a B-. I think that if you meet your expectations, you should at least get a B. And then depending on what the performances are within meeting those expectations, I'll give you a minus, a plus, or just a B flat. And I thought that they met expectations. They did a lot of, new things in this World Cup, a lot of firsts in this World Cup. But I also think that they left a little bit on the table when it comes to winning against the bigger teams that they played against, right? The Switzerland game, I thought they had chances, just weren't clinical enough. And obviously Gregor Colbill had an amazing game in that one. And then on the Morocco game, they were dominating that first half, but I kept telling my friends, this is a team that because they did not score a goal, they're going to get gassed out, and Morocco's going to convert on that, and that's exactly what happened. But so I can't, in good faith, give them anything above a B-. I think a B- is still a good grade for them because they did meet expectations. They looked dominant in the Qatar win. They got so many firsts in this World Cup. I thought Jesse Marsch had a good performance in lieu of all the injuries. So give me a B-.
Yeah, B- is really good, and I think that's where I'm set with them too. I think,
Okay.
Like you said, they met their expectations, and that does deserve a B. And just everything, I think everything they went through, I was really disappointed in that Switzerland game because I think that Switzerland game was very much, theirs to win.
Yeah, it was up for grabs for sure.
And they were the reason they were their own reason they lost. Granted, you could say Kobel, amazing keeper. Side note, I think that man should be a contender for the Golden Globe.
I agree, for sure.
But just, you got to take advantage of those chances, and that's something they couldn't do because they win that second game, they most likely top their group, and they get to play their home game, their knockout home game.
Well, that was the third game. Canada played Qatar in the second game.
Again.
And so, regardless of that, everything you said was correct, right? Yeah. That loss, it was tough. 'Cause I think also going into that game, if they got a draw, they would have gotten first place because they put a shellacking on Qatar, right? And so, it was tough. I think they could have gotten a draw. Maybe they did deserve a draw, but yeah, tough. All right, let's talk about my United States. I think that the best way I can describe this World Cup is this team, I thought, met expectations. They did everything right in the lead up to the hinge point. And what I mean by the hinge point is if you beat Belgium in the round of 16, this is a glamorous success for U.S. soccer. This is the best ever result that the United States has ever had at a World Cup. If you lose to Belgium, well, then that leaves a sour taste in your mouth. You didn't do anything special, but you did meet expectations. You had a really good World Cup. So from that aspect, I'm happy that the United States did as well as they did. I thought they put together some of the best performances that we've seen. They broke down 3 great defenses in Paraguay, Bosnia, and Australia. They beat all of them by double digits, right? 2-0 win against Bosnia in a game where they wrongfully, I think, went down 10 men and were still able to persevere and win that game. But I'm jumping around the real situation. That last performance was absolutely horrendous. That last performance is one of the reasons why there's a sadness around what happened at this World Cup. Even though if you look at it in a vacuum, you went to a 5th game. You won 3 games at this World Cup, which has never been done in the United States soccer. Another similar thing to Canada, where there are so many firsts for this team. The most goals that they've ever scored at a World Cup. The most wins that they've ever had at a World Cup. The biggest win that they've had in an opening game. And probably the best performance that you could ever see this team have. I think a lot of people would argue that the 3-2 win over Portugal in 2002 was better. And again, I was 1 year old when that World Cup happened, so I can only see what I say in replays. And that was a very impressive win for sure. But that 4-1 win against Paraguay is still gonna stick with me forever, right? That win was insane. But yeah, I think that if I want to say this in a sentence, in one sentence. You met expectations, but you didn't do anything special. And that is a sad reality for a generation that everyone touted as doing something special at this World Cup, right? Like, this was the end point for this generation. Ever since we didn't qualify for 2018, everyone looked for 2026. You have hosting rights for this World Cup. And I think that there is a little bit too much blame being given to specific players, and I'll get to that in a minute. But they have accomplished a lot, but they didn't do anything special, is all I can say. Daniel, how do you think the United States did, and what do you think the story will be heading out of this World Cup towards 2030 about this generation of United States men's national team players from 2018 basically to 2026?
Yeah, so I think this U.S. team did exceptional. I think they did a great job. I think they met expectations, but I think way too much. I think the focus just got lost. Like, we lost the plot after that red card and everything else that was involved with it, the politics and everything like that.
Yeah.
But aside from that, I'll get into that in a bit. But I think this team did well. I think they did very well. I really think they should have, won all 3 games. I think it was a bit unfortunate that they sat out their players against Turkey. But
yeah, honestly though, like, that should have been a draw. Like,
yeah,
that whole last sequence was ridiculous. Like, the amount of Pulisic got megged. Like, there was a slip in there from a United States defender. The cross ricocheted twice. Yeah, whatever. But yeah, continue.
But overall, it was really great. I enjoyed, me not necessarily being a fan of the U.S. national team. I enjoyed watching their games. It was some fun football up until that last game. And so I thought it was a great tournament. But then, we get to the round of 16 game against Belgium. And it's like you have all this politics, going, like, just surrounding the game, and it's taken away from the game. Everything was lost.
The outside noise got way too big for this team.
Yeah. And I think that was a part. I think I will blame that being part of the reason they lost. You have all this media attention. Just way too much going to your head, and it's just like Belgium took advantage of that. I straight up think they took advantage of the fact that everyone's downing them. And,
Charles de Ketelaere said it in his post-game interview that they were motivated by this whole situation. And, Fuller and Balogun wasn't at the head of any of this. I don't think that he should be blamed at all, but I think there is something to be said where the United States is looking a certain way. And sure, you can say that it's because they're not playing as high level of teams, but I would argue that when you look at the teams that they played, the defenses of some of those teams, Australia's defense is better than Belgium's defense. I'll say that right now. I'm being honest. Paraguay's defense is, I think, similar up there with Belgium's defense. And people are going to, if they want to come at me, go ahead. But I know what these defenses provide, right? And besides the players themselves, the United States beat a really good defense in Paraguay and Australia. And for a lack of a better term, I think the outside noise got to their heads and they just were not prepared for that round of 16 game. Mind you, this happened one day before the game, right? This is not something that they could dwell on for days upon days. And where we thought that this would be a disadvantage against Belgium, where they were going to have to prepare for Balogun, this just lit a fire under them to try and win this game after having a huge 3-2 comeback win against Senegal, where they got dominated for 80 minutes. And they went out there and performed at the highest of their abilities. So props to Belgium. I think another point about this World Cup, I wouldn't say it was great, as you said. I'm in there more regularly, and I think that I can sit here and truly say that this wasn't a great World Cup from them. Was it one of their better World Cups of all time? Yeah, I think this you could chalk this up as the best or the second best World Cup performance that the United States has ever had. But I still think that a quarterfinal needed to happen for me to truly call it a great World Cup. And the last thing I'll say before we get to our final bit here about the USA, I think a lot of the blame going on Christian Pulisic is a bit asinine to me personally. Yes, has he been touted as the golden boy? Has he been touted as the greatest player in United States soccer history? I've even said that, right? I think he's the best talent that we've ever had for the USA. Sure. Did he have a bad World Cup? I think he did. I don't think he performed that well at this World Cup. But this was telegraphed because the last 6 months at AC Milan, he did not play that well. He didn't have a goal contribution until the Senegal game in the friendly before the World Cup started. And so all of that insane goodwill that he built up in his club career over the last 2.5 years prior to that, right? Like one of the best, if not the best Serie A player, a Serie A attacker in terms of goal contributions. This is a guy that I thought had to be a game changer in this game if Balogun was there or if Balogun wasn't there. And so for him to go down to an injury, it sucks, right? But I'm not going to sit here and say that Christian Pulisic was the reason we lost at this World Cup. That is not... I think it's a scapegoating from the media that has happened. I will never sit here and say that Christian Pulisic had a phenomenal World Cup. I will never sit here and say that Christian Pulisic went out there and, he put on for the badge and he did all that he could. But I'm also not going to sit here and say that he's the sole reason why we lost. Serginho Dest was terrible in that game. Tim Ream got dunked on for no reason by CDK. Like Charles de Ketelaere, like casual Americans are going to sit here and think that Charles de Ketelaere is some phenomenal striker. He's not even a striker. He doesn't play the 9. And so we can blame Matt Freese is an absolute dumbass for what he did. He pulled a Youngway coup and legitimately hit the floor. Like that's ridiculous. Like
it's unheard
all
of.
the frustrations that happened in that game, I'll vent them out eventually, but this is a game that I think is going to stick with the US fan base for a while. But let's just wrap this up with a final grade. What would you give the United States in terms of a final grade? And then I'll talk about it later. So you go first.
I think I'm very similar with how we graded Canada. I think it's also, in that B minus B range. I think, I think I'll give them a B just to lighten the wound a bit. But I think overall, I think for what it was worth, I think they met their expectations once again. I think expectations were around a 16 minimum, and they met that. You did say you would have liked the quarterfinal, and I think I agree. A quarterfinal for this team would have elevated it and been like, okay, best World Cup team. You know, we can sit back and remember this team and be like, we made a World Cup quarterfinal. But I think I think a B grade is good for this team.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll compartmentalize this a little bit. For the first 4 games of this World Cup, I would give the United States an A plus. I think that they were one of the best attacking teams at this World Cup through the round of 32. One of the best attacking teams at this World Cup, had a very fun style of play, beat the brakes off of 3 opponents, had some big moments. Like, we're talking about moments like you want to talk about the Tillman free kick goal. That's a big moment from this World Cup. The Alex Freeman goal in against Australia. The own goals, the amount of own goals that we had in the first 4 games. And even in they won't count it as an own goal. Malik Tillman technically scored the goal against Belgium, but that was a deflection off of the wall, right? Regardless of that, that's a moment that I'll remember from this World Cup. Shutting up Australian fans. That was always fun for me. You know, that was somehow turned into a rivalry at this World Cup. And that was always fun. But at the end of the day, you can say what you want to say about the round of 16 aspect of it. I had a little bit higher expectations of this team, and I thought that a quarterfinal was meeting expectations and surpassing it's a weird thing because, like, you can't really say that the same thing is meeting and surpassing expectations, but I was not happy with the round of 16 performance. I'm also going to give them a B, and so if you take into account A plus for the first 4 games and an F for the round of 16 game, I think it balances out. I think I would give this a B for the USA. All right, let's talk about Mexico. You want to get on your soapbox about how you felt about this Mexico World Cup? I think for this team to do what they did, it was one of the most fun teams at this World Cup, I'll say right now.
Yeah, so I think, obviously, I think this team was very fun. You know, this team had an attack that was, you know, unheard of for a Mexico team. Nobody's ever heard of, since like maybe the early 2000s, where, you know, they had a steady and fun attack. And with Julian Quinones leading that charge, it was honestly, it was surprising, but it was fun to see. It was like a breath of fresh air for the first time. I think throughout this tournament, I think Mexico only got better. I think, you know, they were I think Aguirre was finding out what was working. And I think as he got into it, he's like, okay, I like these 2 together. I think I like him starting more because we saw it. You know, we saw how the lineup progressed into, you know, the knockouts.
Did you like how much he used Luis Romo at the end of the tournament as well? Okay. Because I thought Luis Romo was, like, obviously this player that's, like, renowned as, you know, a dumbass when it comes to the midfield. But I thought he progressed really well in this tournament. Like, I thought he looked really, I'm not going to say really good, but I think he looked decent, and he grew as the tournament went on.
Yeah, he grew as it went on. I think he grew his stock a bit to, you know, stay on the national team, because I will say there are quite a few players on this team that don't deserve to be on this national team anymore, which probably won't be.
Do tell.
There's one man I can't speak of. That's ill will. But anyways,
my goodness.
I think as this lineup progressed, I think they only got better. You know, we saw the likes of Eric Lira boost his stock a ton. I think that was great.
Absolutely.
I think he put his name on the map. You know, we were all talking about Gilberto Mora, who finally got his start as the tournament got on. But I think the real star here was Eric Lira. Just he bossed that midfield. You know, we saw it in the England game. You know, we were unfortunate to lose 3-2. But everything that I saw in that game, I saw that, you know, this Mexico team could have beat England. You know, I think there were things in that game that were very, you know, hit or miss. You know, I think the ref, not to blame the game on the ref, because I won't blame it on the ref at all, but I think the ref just, both ways, I think the calls were a bit, you know, sketch. I think something should have been called, something shouldn't, and, you know, he just wasn't consistent. But overall, I think this team, you know, setting up into the Rafa Marquez era, I think they're shaping up to be great. I think a lot of the expectations were once again for this team, considering they got grouped last World Cup, was, you know, just make it out of the group. That's all we want right now. You know, there was heavy criticism over who they were bringing, and I think a lot of people were mixed between, you know, around a 32 win and just making it out of the group. And I think this team met expectations and in a certain aspect exceeded. I think they met expectations in the sense, we made it to a round of 16 game again. That's where we've always gotten to. I think still exceeding would have been winning a quarter or making it to a quarterfinal.
Yeah.
But I think just with the fluidity and how clinical this attack became, I think that's like exceeding expectations in itself.
Yeah. I think that for Mexico, I think a big thing that was huge for this team, I think they restored a little bit of pride for Mexico. I think when you come out of that, I mean, not even come out, but like prior to the 2022 cycle, we're talking about a USA team that had won 3 straight trophies in CONCACAF, right? And, 2 Nations Leagues and a Gold Cup. Actually, I think it was just 1 Nations League and 1 Gold Cup, and then they won the 2 Nations League after that. But regardless, right? Mexico was not looking good, right? They dropped points to the USA. They dropped points to Canada. I think if you remember, like in that qualification cycle in 2022, they went to Canada. I think it was in Toronto, and they lost that game. I gotta restart my camera, of course. But no, it's fine. But yeah, like all the vibes for this team were not looking good in 2022. That cycle was a wash. After, I thought, a pretty promising 2018 cycle where they beat Germany, had a close loss to Brazil in the round of 16, but it's Brazil, right? Like, what can you do? And that whole cycle was pretty terrible. They won a Gold Cup, but you got to win a Gold Cup eventually, right? It's Mexico.
Yeah.
The 2026 cycle, I wasn't really high on Mexico going into this cycle. I thought that a lot of the same players that we saw in 2022 were probably going to be back on this team. But I thought they did a really good job of getting these younger players in this, which finally, right, like somebody had the cojones to do that, right? This is a team that is filled with stars that are going to be at the 2030 World Cup, whether that be a Gilberto Mora or an Eric Lira or, a Julian Quinones maybe. Raul, I think, will be probably a little bit aged out, but he might start, right? Santi's going to be there. But, I think that if nothing happened, they were... if nothing happened, they... Oh, wow. Dude, you're totally off that train now?
Okay, I'm not off him. I'll let you finish your point and then I'll...
I was just going to say, if they did nothing, they restored pride for this team. And that, to me, deserves, a higher grade than the USA or Canada. Because I think that if you want to talk about opponents, sure. But they still beat Ecuador in a round of 32 game. Like, that's a tough ask. Got 9 points. One of the few teams that got 9 points at this World Cup. Regardless of opponent, I don't want to say that they played some insane group stage opponents because, South Africa lost in the round of 32. And I would personally say that the USA probably had the hardest opponents, right? Paraguay made a round of 16. They beat Germany. Australia went to pens against Egypt. They themselves lost to Turkey. And so I think that was a really, really tough group. But Mexico, I think the performances, the crowds were crazy. And the last thing I'll say, I think they have some foundations for 2030. And I think that's the biggest thing that you can say coming out of this World Cup, that at least you didn't make it past the round of 16, but I think that was also a tough ask against an England team that is top 5 in the world genuinely. Like, we had them top 5 before the tournament started, right?
Yeah.
And you did all you could do, right? And tough loss. You went out swinging against England, something that the USA and Canada can't say. And yeah, overall, I think a pretty successful World Cup. But go ahead. Why do you hate Santi Jimenez now?
So I don't hate Santiago Jimenez, but I'm kind of slowly riding off that train because if you know me, I'm this man's number one fan. Like, I want this man to succeed.
Well,
but
you're not his number one fan.
Coming into this World Cup, I was very iffy on him being selected into this team in the first place because, he didn't have a great season at Milan at all. He was hurt all season. And when he came back, he couldn't find his form. He wasn't confident on the ball. And I think, we saw that in the Ecuador game where, he gets that fast break with the ball and he kind of just slows down.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of people reminiscing to, that the 23 Gold Cup final where
yeah.
he's
Where he
he's
beat
on the ball
Panama.
against Panama. Yeah, and if you look at those two videos, he does not have the confidence to go out and beat defenders like how he did there, and it's very sad to see because this man wants to represent his country and do well, and he's had this hype around him for a while, and it's just right now he doesn't have that confidence and he's not clinical like he should be.
Yeah.
And so for me as a fan, I'm like, as much as I love you, it pains me to say that, like, I don't want you on this team until you're good. You're
It
having
sounds like you're
20
breaking up
plus.
with him, man.
Yeah, I am breaking up with him right now, basically. But I don't want you on this team till you're having like 20 plus goal seasons.
Yeah.
As a striker, that should be the minimum, especially for this team here. This attack is only going to get better. I think strikers are going to get produced more, and I think it's going to become a tougher job, for Santi Jimenez to get into the starting lineup. And just I think
sorry, continue.
I think there was just one more point I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think what Javier Aguirre did to set up for this World Cup is amazing, given the time he was given. Because we had there were two different coaches before him after that 2022 cycle, where it was Diego Coca and then Jimmy Lozano. They were both fired within I think
Couple
Diego
months.
Coca was fired. Yeah, Coca had a couple months, and then
Coca
Lozano,
literally
I think,
had
a
one
year.
Nations League, and he was out of there. I think that was the one where the USA beat them 3-0 in the semi. Or maybe that was the one where we beat you guys 2-0 in the final. I don't know which one it was, but it was one of those two.
Yeah.
It was a failure regardless, right?
Mm-hmm. But I think Aguirre was given, a team that was so low. Nobody had any hope for this team.
Yeah.
And within the span of 2 years, through scrutiny, he had a great, I don't know the record off the top of my head, but he had a great record with his national team. He restored life, and quite frankly, he set this team up perfectly for what Rafa Marquez can do next.
Yeah, no, I think Aguirre did phenomenal at this tournament. I was just going to finish this off because we've gone a little long on this segment, but I wanted to just go through the lineup, and you just tell me, do you think they'll be at the next World Cup? Because I'm going to do this with the USA, but I'm going to actually do this as a post on Instagram. So follow us on @TheRelayMedia so you can see that post of my predictive 2030 World Cup roster for the USA. Let's start with Tala, Rangel.
I think yes.
Okay. Jorge Sanchez.
No.
He will be 32 at the next World Cup.
He's already getting sent back to Mexico.
If you don't
He's
get
out of
another
Greece.
right back in the next 4 years, nuke the whole generation. Okay. Cesar will be 33.
I think he'll still be there, but as a backup.
He won't be starting. Okay. Johan will be 31.
I think also as a backup, unless
the defense is gonna have to get some, because the midfield and the attack I think has some really good prospects. The midfield especially, right? Littered with prospects. But I think the defense really needs to. Gallardo's probably not gonna be there. He's gonna be 35 at the next World Cup. Gilberto Mora, obviously,
That's a given.
Beyond an injury. Eric Lira at 30. Now this is an interesting one. Do you think Eric Lira will be there at the next World Cup?
I think so. I think, with the form he's had, I think, he keeps it up. I think he'll be there.
Luis Romo, he'll be 34. Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay, Piojo. Do you think
No.
Piojo Alvarado will be? No, okay, interesting. Raul at 39. He'll do the Ronaldo.
As much as I'd like to say yes, I don't think so.
You know what? He might be there as a third string striker. I'm being honest.
I could see that.
I could honestly see Raul still being there at 39. Okay, Julian.
Yes.
He'll be 33. Okay. Edson. Edson's younger than I thought he was. He's gonna be 32 at the next World Cup.
I think Edson's a shaky one for me because I don't think, people are rating him properly right now, and he hasn't been the best, I'll give him that. Mm-hmm. But he's been a household name and the staple of this team for a while that I want to say yes, but I think I'm going to say no for now.
Okay, Brian Gutierrez, I think he'll be there.
Yeah, he's still young. I know he's
23. He'll be 27 at the next World Cup.
They were scapegoating him, but I think He's
Bro,
got.
like people gotta relax. Santi Jimenez, 29.
I'm gonna say no for now.
Dude, his heat map in the England game is so funny. All right, Fidalgo,
No.
33 at the next World Cup. Guillermo Martinez. What's his nickname? Why am I forgetting?
Memote.
Memote. Yeah, that's what it is. I was like, I don't know if it was Babote, but Babote is somebody else. Who is Babote?
That's Santi.
That's Santi. Okay. I was like, what the? And then yeah, that was it because I went to Harry Kane. Oh no, you know who's the guy that I mean, again, this is me because I'm not as tapped into the World Cup team as much as you are, but I am maybe I'm not shocked, but I'm like kind of surprised that Chino Huerta only got 6 minutes at this World Cup. Is that just me? Am I being a casual there, or like I think he should have got some time?
I think he deserved to have a bit more time on the wing, but to be fair, he was coming off an injury and he was kind of like rushed into this lineup. So
yeah,
like,
he only got 6 minutes against South Korea.
Like he scraped his way into this lineup, basically.
Okay, gotcha. All right, yeah, that's our breakdown, our host post-mortem, as I would call it. And hopefully at 2030, I'll be there. I think I'm gonna try and go to the World Cup in 2030. And you know we'll have some closing thoughts about this World Cup after the World Cup final. We'll talk about it. But other than that, yeah, that's our final thoughts. Oh wait, I forgot to say, what are final grades on Mexico? Real quick, I'm gonna give them a B+. I'd give them a B+.
Yeah, I think a B+ is great for this team. Given
you could argue an A- because like at the end of like what more could they have done? But
that is true.
Yeah, I'll give them a B+. I could be swayed to an A- though. Yeah, that's our thoughts on Mexico, USA, and Canada. The World Cup semifinals are just around the corner. We're going to have one today and one tomorrow, and it's a matchup between the four top-ranked opponents in the world. We're talking about France versus Spain, Mbappe versus Yamal, and on the other side, it's going to be Harry Kane versus Lionel Messi as Argentina faces England. I think both of these games are pretty fun overall. I think that we can say that all we wanted an underdog in there. I certainly wanted an underdog in there, whether that would have been a Morocco or a Norway. But tough ask sometimes. This is the first time since I think 98 or 94 that the number one ranked team coming into the tournament actually made the semifinals. And I thought that was an insane stat. This is a tournament that isn't nice, I guess, to the number one ranked team in the world coming into the tournament. And finally, France has kind of broken that curse. So let's start with France versus Spain. France defeated Morocco 2-0 in their quarterfinal. They generated 22 shots, 8 efforts on target. I think Yassine Bounou was an absolute dog in that game and kept that closer than it should have been. Spain, on the other hand, advanced with a 2-1 win over Belgium. They've only conceded 1 goal in this entire tournament. I got a couple of key questions coming into this one. For me personally, the 3 biggest questions for me: can Spain control possession without leaving space for Mbappe? You want to talk about a team that takes advantage of space? That's what the French have been doing all World Cup long. Mbappe, Olise, and Dembele, Doué, it doesn't matter. Any of the A's, right? They are going to get space and they're going to go forward and attack with some heat. They, I think, are clicking on all cylinders. I was a little bit scared about this midfield coming into this tournament, but Kone has been an absolute beast. And I think that midfield with Rabiot, Kone, and whoever else is in that one, I can't remember. I know Tchouameni's on the bench right now. I cannot remember who's their third midfielder right now, but regardless of that. Oh, no, they have 2 holding midfielders. No, it is just Rabiot and Kone, because then they have the 3 attacking midfielders and the striker up top. So, yeah, those 2 guys allow for those 4 to just sit in space, and whenever they get the ball and retrieve it, just pump it down the field, and they're able to fly on the counterattack. So that's going to be a big question for me. Can Spain control the possession without leaving space for Mbappe? Because that has been their game plan for the last couple of games. And I don't know if that's going to work as well as it has against teams like Belgium and a team, like who can really hit them on the counterattack. Maybe even Austria, but, I don't think it was that big of a threat as it is against France. Second, can Spain's defense survive repeated one-on-one situations, right? Marc Cucurella, I should say, versus whoever's going to be on that right side, I think it's going to be Dembele. That's going to be a matchup to watch for me. And then Pedro Porro, I think he's going to be on an island against Mbappe, and I don't think that's going to be the best matchup for Pedro Porro. But those guys are going to have to be big for the Spanish to win this game. And the Spanish have won the last 2 matchups against France, and they were able to stifle a little bit of that offense. And so can they do it again? Can they survive repeated one-on-one situations? And then on the France side, I think, does France finally get stung a little bit? Can that Spanish counterattack with Lamine Yamal, with Alex Baena, with Mikel Oyarzabal, can they hurt this French team that hasn't necessarily been tested to the highest abilities coming into this game? I think these are all questions that I think we're going to need to answer in this one, and I lean one way, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. What's one question, Daniel, that you have coming into this game that could decide this game for both sides?
I think my question is whether or not Nico Williams. No, I shouldn't be.
I think he's frozen. We will just move on to my players to watch in this one. For France, I think it's pretty simple. I think you can say Kylian Mbappe with this one, but I'm actually going to say Michael Olise. I think Michael Olise has been a phenomenal player for this team. Has had a ridiculous amount of goals assists at this World Cup. And I think that when you talk about a prime offensive player that is able to connect with a lot of his teammates, I think that's what makes him so dangerous, right? Like, I think Michael Olise has been one of the best players at this tournament. Like, he deserves player of the tournament nods, team of the tournament nods. And I think he's some guy that in the middle of that park or even on the right side can really hurt this Spanish center defensive mids like Rodri, and also can hurt the center backs because of his passing ability. But also he's got a left foot that can just curl one into the back of the net. So Michael Olise is my player to watch when it comes to France. On the Spanish side, I'm going to go with Lamine Yamal. I think that this is pretty self-explanatory. Lamine Yamal has not been playing to the best of his abilities at this World Cup. I think there is another gear that he can get into. And can he finally get into that gear against a team like France, which, 2 years ago, he went out there and scored a wonder goal against them in that Euros semifinal. And so Lamine, I think, can tap into that. If he can tap into that, he's going to provide the French backline a real issue. And finally, I think the French team is going to, be tested at the level that they should have been for this World Cup against a team like Morocco, right? Without Ismail Sabari, or they got rid of a game against Germany because Paraguay beat the Germans in penalties. Some predictions for this one before my co-host comes back in. I don't know where he went, but I'll just give it real quick. I think coming into this tournament, I had Spain winning this game. I had this exact game on my bracket, and I think that with this game, I think France is just coming into this too good, right? Like, they are just too good of a team. Their offense is just humming on another level right now, and I don't see the Spanish, even though they have defended really good. Pau Cubarsí has been really good. Cucurella has been really good. Pedro Porro has been really good. I don't think that Unai Simon has been tested as much as we would like to think, and he's going to get tested a lot in this game. And so give me the French to win this one, and I'm going to say by a 2-1 scoreline. In lieu of some technical difficulties, I'll be doing the show, or the rest of the show, I should say, solo. And so Daniel had to leave. His camera set up all crashed out. You can't reconnect. So we'll just pick it up from where we were. I know this is a bit of a harsh cut, but sometimes this has got to happen. But we were talking about England versus Argentina after I think France is going to win this game against Spain. by a scoreline of a 2-1. England, Argentina, on the other hand, I think England reaching this semifinal has been impressive. I think that they have been a good enough team. The question has just been, can they reach those expectations for the first time in forever? Because they just have not been the same team at major tournaments when it comes to these latter stages. And a lot of people thought that maybe they could slip up a little bit earlier at this tournament, because when they saw this lineup, this roster, I should say, it wasn't as good as some people had hoped. So, but I mean, this team has been clicking through two players, especially Jude Bellingham and Harry Kane. Jude Bellingham is making a case to be the Golden Ball winner. I think that he's had a phenomenal World Cup, and he's now creeping up on Harry Kane in terms of the goal scoring department. With his big goals that he's had a brace in the last 2 games, and I think that this guy has shown that he is one of the best midfielders in the world. Attacking, he's defended really well at this tournament, and I think that those goals that he had in the Azteca were huge for his confidence moving forward in this tournament. On the other side, Argentina, they defeated Switzerland 3-1 in extra time, but they've been pushed deep into matches in every stage. Went to extra time against Cape Verde. Almost went to extra time against Egypt, but they had a late winner, and then went to extra time against Switzerland. So this team has been in the fire. They know how to suffer, and they know how to win through that suffering. Some big questions that I think need to be answered for England. Is Jude Bellingham currently the most influential player in this tournament? I think if they win this game, that's the way that they're going to have to, if they win this game, it's going to be through Jude Bellingham. And I think this question will answer yes if they are to win this. Jude is just playing on another level right now. The passing, the dribbling ability has been off the charts for Jude Bellingham in this game. I saw some dribbles that he had against Mexico. 2v1, 3v1, he's able to get past his defenders. And when you talk about the most influential players at this tournament, Lionel Messi is going to be one of them. But if Jude Bellingham has another great performance, I think it's very hard for England to not win this game. Argentina, does their experience give them advantage in this stage of this tournament? Sometimes, these experiences that they've had, they've won 3 straight major tournaments, 2 Copa Americas, and 1 World Cup. That really sets the difference in these type of games, and I think that they can give a little bit of a boost. That can give them a little bit of a boost, I should say, when it comes to the latter stages of this tournament. And the last thing I will say, which team has the better bench? I think this game can go far again, like go 120 minutes, because that has been the norm for Argentina over these last couple of games. And I think that this could be a situation like 2022 where, they had a lot of close games, had a close game against Australia, had a close game against Netherlands, and then they just beat the brakes off of Croatia in that semifinal game. But I think this is a tougher opponent for them. And so I think that this is going to be the first time that we see Argentina against an opponent that can truly destroy them in terms of the head-to-head matchups in the lineup. And so which team is going to have the better bench when they go far into this game? Who has the options that can come off of this bench and really make a difference? When I look at Argentina, I think more of a team. This is a team that has been tenured. They know each other. They're able to have a lot of great chemistry, and their attacking has been exceptional. For what we want to say about France's attack, Argentina's attack has scored more goals than France, and I think that is something to be said about this team. While they don't have the name brand players that a lot of people would know, they are able to muster up a phenomenal performance behind Lionel Messi, and I think that he's one of the clear players to watch in this one. Another player to watch for Argentina is Lisandro Martinez. I think he's had a really good World Cup. He's scored a couple of big goals and has had a couple of big clearances. And I think that, his stature, not in height, but in, the situations that he presents himself in, and he's able to get out of tough situations through his dribbling and his passing. I think Lisandro Martinez is going to have to put in a shift against Harry Kane and these attackers on Wednesday. And for England, beyond Jude Bellingham, beyond Harry Kane, I think Declan Rice is going to have a big game. Argentina usually has been bossing the midfield against a lot of these teams. Against Switzerland, against Egypt, they're able to really, hold the ball. And maybe not necessarily against Egypt all that often, but in the group stage especially, right? Against Argentina, against Algeria. They were able to use that midfield to retain the ball as much as they wanted to. And this is going to be a big test for Declan Rice, who I think has had a pretty good tournament. I would say that he should be included in this trio of players that has been really showing up for the English. But he's going to be tested like no other player has been tested at this tournament. The responsibility that he has, alongside Elliot Anderson for sure, but the responsibility that he has to really lock up this midfield for Argentina is going to be huge. Bellingham, we've talked about him earlier, but he became the second youngest player to score braces in consecutive World Cup knockout matches. While Messi, on the other side, he has a 9-match World Cup scoring streak that ended in the quarterfinals. So he's going to look to get back to scoring ways in this game against England. Final predictions for this one. I think it's going to be similar to the France-Spain game in the fact that both of these teams are going to have a lot of attacking prowess. I think Argentina gets it done. I said Argentina is the best team in the world coming into this tournament, and while I do think that Jude and Harry Kane are two of the best 5 players at this tournament, probably, maybe top 7 if you want to include some players that have been knocked out right now, there hasn't been much else beyond that. And I think Pickford could be a little bit, I'm not going to say a liability, but he could get caught out a couple of times in this game, especially against a team that is humming now. They've scored 3 goals in their last 3 games. Granted, against Cape Verde, Egypt, and Switzerland, sure, but that is still a feat that, is hard to top. I think they've actually scored 3 goals at every game except 1 at this World Cup. So this is an offense that is playing out of its mind. This defense is very hard to score on, regardless of what we want to say about the performances in these last couple of games. It's taken some wonder goals from Egypt and Cape Verde to really break through on this team. And so Argentina is a tough defense to break down. I'm going to say Argentina wins this one 2-2 going into penalties, and then they win the penalty shootout in the semifinal. So we get an Argentina versus France rematch in the World Cup final. Last segment for the day, since Daniel tapped out, couldn't be here for the draft. I will be going over my wide receiver superlatives going into the 2026 and 27 NFL season. I absolutely love doing these because they're not really rankings. I think rankings get a little stale for everyone. I think everybody argues over whether somebody should be like 5th or 6th. But superlatives, I think that's where things get interesting, because now you're asking completely different questions. Some questions like the most to gain, most to lose, some breakout candidates. So I'm going to be handing out some wide receiver superlatives and seeing who has some of the most responsibility going in to this 2026-27 season. First superlative is going to be most to gain. And for me, I'm going to say Jameson Williams of the Detroit Lions. Jameson has had a good career so far in this NFL career that he's had. But I think that he has a real chance to shine. And with the contract coming up, I think Jameson Williams in this, season can not just be a deep threat for this team, but really, start showing his worth in the intermediate and short passing games when it comes to the Detroit Lions. Jameson, I thought he has always been this threat, but last year I don't think he played as well as we have seen him play in years previously. There were flashes there for sure, but I think there needs to be a little bit more consistency when it comes to Jameson Williams. And so I think he's got the most to gain this year in the NFL season. Most to lose, I'm going Wan'Dale Robinson. Weirdly, I think Wan'Dale, he just got his new contract with Tennessee, but I think quickly he could be on the outs for this wide receiver room. They've given him a lot of money, but with Elic Iomanner already there, and Chigakonkwo coming back, and they drafted Carnell Tate in the first round of this year's draft, which I thought was a little bit surprising. He could be on tap to not get as many touches as we would have thought coming out of free agency. So I think Wan'Dale Robinson, while I do think that he can have a high ceiling, there's a lot more to lose there for Wan'Dale when he has gone to Tennessee. Biggest responsibility is my next category, and I'm going to go with Jamar Chase. Yes, he does have a partner in T. Higgins, but you want to talk about a guy that is so important to their offense. I don't think that there are many players that you can name that are more important to their offense than Jamar Chase, right? Jamar Chase, I think he sets the tone for this team, and sometimes even when he does go crazy, they don't win. So maybe, the biggest responsibility tag is a little bit scuffed in that aspect, but I still think if the Bengals are successful this year, it is going to be because of Jamar Chase. He has, separated himself, I think, as the best receiver in the NFL after the last couple of years. And I think that whether you want to say that Jamar Chase is the best receiver or not, I think that he is the most important piece for this Bengals team that is looking to get back to the playoffs. So give me Jamar Chase for biggest responsibility. This is a funny one. Lowest ceiling wide receiver room. This is a team that I thought could have drafted a wide receiver in the draft this year, but didn't choose to. And I was a little bit surprised because of that. And that's going to be the Las Vegas Raiders. This team didn't necessarily improve this wide receiver room as well as I thought they should have. Yes, they do have Brock Bowers, but beyond that, the pass catching options are not that great. Trey Tucker is still there. Jalen Naylor, I thought, is a decent pickup, but I don't think he's going to be some world-changing decision for the Las Vegas Raiders offseason. And then Dante Thornton Jr., never was big coming into the season, coming into last season, I should say, from him, but he didn't really show me that much in this upcoming season. So he's going to have to show a lot more. Jack Besh is still there, but I don't think that this team, even if they play to the highest of their levels, are going to be that big of a wide receiver room. They're not going to, command as much of a pie when it comes to the offensive playmaking ability. I think that's going to be more on Ashton Jeanty. That's going to be more on Brock Bowers. And I think that's going to be more on Fernando Mendoza as the new quarterback in Las Vegas. Highest ceiling wide receiver room. To me, it's the Minnesota Vikings. You want to talk about three bona fide stud wide receivers. Justin Jefferson, who is to me still a top 2, top 3 wide receiver in the NFL. You can argue still number 1, right? Jordan Addison, who I think at the top of his game, at worst, I think he's a deep threat. At best, this is a really good wide receiver too. I think if you talk about Jordan Addison at his peak, I think he can play as good as Devontae Smith. I don't think he's better than Devontae Smith, but I think if Jordan Addison is playing as well as he can, this is a very good wide receiver when it comes to wide receiver 2 market. And then Juwan Jennings. This is a guy that has, me being a San Francisco 49ers fan, I know Juwan Jennings for a long time. This is a solid wide receiver. He's so reliable in third down situations. That's why he got the nickname Third and Juwan. And I think Juwan is a tough-nosed wide receiver that they needed in the slot. And when he was playing with guys like Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, really thrived. And I think he can thrive again in a situation where he's not going to be given as much attention as he would have in the last year in San Francisco, where there was a lot of injuries, and he was literally the only wide receiver that was healthy. So the Minnesota Vikings, I think, is the highest ceiling because I think if all 3 of these guys are clicking, you can see an insane numbers from all 3 of these guys. Last 3 as we go. Breakout candidate. I'm going Rashid Shaheed. Shaheed signed a new contract with Seattle, and I think that he showed flashes of what he can do in the passing game last year. I think that Shaheed, when he was in New Orleans, was kind of a dedicated, deep route guy. Just a lot of verticals, a lot of post routes. But Shaheed, I think, has been turned into a gadget player for Seattle in that offense. Now, granted, they have a new offensive coordinator this year, and I think that could change things. But I think Seattle is still going to be good enough to provide some service to Rashid Shaheed. And so I think Shaheed has a real chance to break out this year. And again, similar to Juwan, not given as much attention because Cooper Kupp and Jackson Smith and Jigba are there. And so I think that he can, really thrive in that scenario. Boom or bust candidate. I'm going Deebo Samuel. This is a guy that I think can really, boom again like he did in his All-Pro season. Maybe not get All-Pro per se, but I think he has the ability still to play to the best of his abilities. Be that wrecker, that wrecking ball. Be literally the Cam Scatterbo of wide receivers. And I think he really has the opportunity to do that, but I also think that there is a path for him to completely fall off the map this year. Didn't have the greatest of first seasons in Washington, and I think him, going back to Washington, I think that there's a chance that he doesn't perform that well. Jaden Daniels is coming back. Maybe they look towards Terry McLaurin, some other weapons that have been in the Washington system in the last couple of years. And I don't know where we lie on Deebo Samuel, but I think he has a really high ceiling, but a really low floor as well. And then lastly, Offensive Player of the Year, dark horse. This is a interesting, topic when it comes to wide receivers, because I think that obviously MVP, dark horse is generally what I do, but that's becoming a quarterback award, as I've stated in the running back superlatives. So I went a little bit off of the grid here, so this isn't necessarily a guy that is in the top 5, top 10 of Offensive Player of the Year odds, but I'm going to go with George Pickens in Dallas. We saw how good George Pickens was last year. He surpassed CeeDee Lamb in terms of numbers last season in Dallas. And I think that Dak Prescott has built a real rapport with George Pickens, I should say. George Pickens has shown that he has game-breaking ability. And I think that could be on show again this year. He went out there and said that he doesn't care about, the new contract. He will play on the tag, and he's ready to play another season in Dallas. And I think that's a phenomenal mindset to have for him. Sure, he can get more money. He deserves more money. But I think in this certain situation, for him to be on the tag, still be in off-season training camp, and being ready to get back on the field, I think George Pickens could really shine this year. And I think if you're talking about a dart throw for Offensive Player of the Year in terms of betting odds, I think George Pickens can put up the numbers and also have a successful team to really warrant Offensive Player of the Year shout. So those are my NFL superlatives coming into this season. That is the end of episode 9. Sorry about the technical difficulty. Sorry Daniel couldn't be here for the latter stages of this show. But we will be back on Friday after the World Cup matches between England and Argentina and Spain and France. We'll also go over our tight end superlatives on that show. If you guys have gone through this entire video, thank you guys for watching. We love the support that you guys have been giving us over the last couple of weeks, especially on our TikTok and our YouTube shorts. Just to bring that up, follow us on @TheRelayMedia on Instagram, X, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts. And Threads, I should say. Other than that, we'll be back on Friday with some more content for you guys. And we'll see who wins these World Cup semifinals, and also who wins the MLB All-Star game that'll be tonight. That'll be a fun game to watch. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.